Call the July meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals for the City of Troy to order. And our first order of business is the roll call. But before I do that, I'll just make a quick introduction for our guests here this evening about the various members here that are present. And to my left is Mr. Eisenbacher, who is a member of the board. Then to his right is Mr. Krent, who's also our liaison from the Planning Commission. To my right is Mr. Bloomingdale, who's a member, and then Mr. Courtney. And I am Glenn Clark, and I'm the elected vice chairman of the board, but because our chairman was not able to be here, I will be the presiding officer tonight. And so at this point in time, we will call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bloomingdale.
Here.
Mr. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Courtney.
Here.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Here.
Mr. Krent.
Here.
Mr. Neal. Mr. Lambert. Absent.
Okay, we do have quorum, and we'll address the an option that the petitioner, the only petitioner on our agenda here tonight, has available to him or her in just a few minutes. So related to our activities here at the Zoning Board of Appeals, just a quick overview of what we do in our rules. The Board of Zoning Appeals is a group of 7, and of course you see 5 here tonight, of your neighbors or peers appointed by City Council to pass judgment on requests for variances and other matters that are brought before them. A variance is a relaxation of the literal provisions of the zoning ordinance. Petitioners must indicate a hardship or practical difficulty running with the land that would warrant the granting of the variance. Related to our procedures, the board will hear the items in the order they appear on the agenda. When an item is called, the chairman will verify that the petitioner is present, then the city administration will summarize the facts of the case. The petitioner will then be given an opportunity to address the board to explain the justification for the action that's been requested. After the petitioner makes their presentation and answers any questions that the board members may have, the chairman will open the public hearing. Any additional persons who wish to speak on the request should raise their hand, and when recognized by the chairman, come up to the podium. The speaker should identify themselves with name and address, indicating their relationship to the property in question, i.e. next door neighbor or live near the property. State whether they are in favor or opposed to the variance request and give reasons for their opinion. Comments must be directed through the chairman. Comments must be kept as brief as possible and closely pertain to the matter under consideration. Only one person will be recognized by the chairman to speak at one time, and then therefore at the conclusion of public comments, the chairman will close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, no other public comment will be taken unless in response to a specific question by a member of this board. The board will then make a motion to approve, deny, or table, which is a delaying of action of the request. In order for the request to pass, a minimum of 4 votes for approval are needed. So you see 4 votes would be that out of 5 tonight. If the request is not granted, the applicant has the right to appeal this board's decision to the Oakland County Circuit Court. So that's the background of what we are going to be doing tonight. And we have minutes for the May 21st meeting. Are there any questions by the board of those minutes as presented? Seeing none. Approval. Item 3, approval of the agenda has been made by Mr. Courtney. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Eisenbacher, I think, had the second on that. And then we can entertain that motion for debate first. Are there any issues of discussion or debate on that motion? Hearing none, I believe that we're prepared for the vote. Mr. Evans.
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Courtney.
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Bloomingdale.
Yes.
Okay, that item is approved. And then we move on to item 4 of the printed agenda that was available at the door for anyone who comes in tonight. Item 4 is hearing of the cases, and that is related to a variance request by Michael Planek. I believe I may have pronounced that partially right. AIA for Stuckey Vitale Architects, 1125 Naughton. And before I turn the matter over to the city administration's representative, which is Mr. Evans here tonight, I would note that a petitioner has a right to request a full board for any item brought before us for consideration. Obviously, for tonight's sake, our conversation, we only have 5 of the 7. So even though the petitioner does not have the right to have a full board, you can request it to be postponed to a future meeting. And we'll let Mr. Evans take it from here, and then we'll call the petitioner or the petitioner's representative up, and then that gentleman could address that issue if you choose to do so. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This property involves a request in order to construct an addition to an existing building, a 4-foot variance to the required 10-foot side yard setback. Now, in the overhead on the screen, the property outlined in red is at the terminus of Naughton Street on the north side, and that neighborhood is south and west of I-75 and east of Stevenson Highway. The property is in a neighborhood surrounded by similar industrial-type uses and similarly shaped. Some properties are similarly shaped. The zoning for the subject property and all abutting and surrounding properties is integrated industrial business. Specific to the request in this overhead, Naughton is at the bottom of the picture, and I've outlined the area that involves the existing building to the lower left-hand portion. That building was built around 1965, according to assessing records, and the applicant wants to add an addition to the north side of that building. Now, the existing building is 6 feet off the side property line, and in order to continue that westerly wall along the same setback, the proposal is to continue having that 6-foot setback from the side property line with the addition. Now, the ordinance requires 10-foot setback, so they'll need a 4-foot variance from this board. So I'm prepared to answer any questions that the board may have for me.
Are there any questions of Mr. Evans? Mr. Krent?
Would you know, of course, this is digging way back into history, when the ordinance changed from a 6-foot to a 10-foot side yard setback?
No, I don't have that information. What I can say is I did research the variance files and did not see any variance for this.
So it was assumed to be allowed at that point?
I would have to presume so. The only other choice the city would have was to say it somehow is illegal. I'm not convinced that's going to be the case.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Courtney, please.
Yes, if this addition, the only thing they need an approval on is the variance is the setback. They're not overbuilding the lot.
No. Presumably no. This is allowed to be approved administratively. While we haven't received an application for the construction, this is the one variance that they knew they needed, and their architect has made application.
Okay, but if they moved the building over that is connected but had the 10-foot variance,
The 10-foot setback, yeah.
the 10-foot setback, they'd still be able to, as far as you can tell, they'd
That
still be able
setback
to
issue would
build.
not get in the way of them proceeding, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other further questions or comments, we call the petitioner forward or his representative. And if you could just make sure you state your name and relationship to the petitioner, or if both of you are going to speak, then if you could both kindly do so.
My name's Bob Brand, 32212 West Lady, Beverly Hills, Michigan, the builder.
I'm Dean Fitzpatrick, the owner of the property. I live in Shelby Township.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. If you could just briefly go over the reason why you're presenting the request.
Sure. One of the primary reason, one is, as Paul had mentioned, the fact that the existing building is at the 6-foot setback. We'd like to continue on that same plane, maintaining door accesses that are existing back in that corner. We'd also like to maximize the space. It's going to be a production facility, so there's going to be trucks going in and out. We want to maintain the maximize the amount of turning radius and space over on the east side of the building for egress and access for deliveries. We have, I believe that there's been a letter forwarded to your files from the
Did you see that
owner of the
letter?
adjacent owner of the adjacent property who see, this is there's kind of a dead space there on the east side of his building, in that space between the two and the proposed building, and he had no objection to anything that was proposed for that.
And he also owns the building west of that also, and the other building across the street from me.
Okay. Are you concluded with your remarks?
Pretty- yeah.
Okay. In those two other property owners, do you have a letter for the?
Same property owner that
He owns all,
Oh, he owns all those. Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. Okay, very good.
Leonard. It used to
Okay.
be Cavity Craft. They were there for 30 years, 40 years, something, Cavity Craft. And Tom's his son, his father owned it, and his father passed on. And so Tom, I've known him for the last 30 years.
Okay, thank you. I'll now ask you gentlemen to, first of all, I'm sorry, stay right there if you would. Are there any members who have questions of the petitioner or his representative? Mr. Courtney?
Yes, with this addition and with the ability to move trucks around, are you going to be short parking spaces?
You know, we've already put plans into the engineer. The engineer's fine with the whole site plan. The only thing that the engineer had any real concern about that we've already dealt with through our engineer is the rainwater retention. So there's underground storage under the parking lot that's being put in. So the rainwater, dealing with the rainwater was the only issue. There's the parking spots are all in compliance with the requirements, and so he's satisfied with what we proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Just one question for myself. So your concept of what the hardship would be, could you explain that? I mean, I understand what you're trying to do with the addition, and it would be easier to have that setback variance granted, but what is the hardship with the piece of property that is owned there?
It's mostly just that, I mean, that extra 4 feet has a large
Steel
impact
trucks will be
has a large
pulling in and out of
impact. Steel trucks and the delivery system.
As a matter of fact, it's tight as it is, and the people that are just to the east of me, TL Electric, it's been problematic for them because people, you can see it up there, they T-bone, and people always pulling into there to use their lot to maneuver around in there.
Okay. Anything further from the board? If not, if you gentlemen could please have a seat. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we'll bring this back to the board's review and/or consideration. Are there any comments from board members? Mr. Krenn?
Well, what I see is the hardship I see, and it's something that was already there on the property. The property already has a 6-foot setback, and it's been there for grandfather for decades. I don't see why, I mean, that to me is a situation where we're almost just following a grandfather situation. It'd be a hardship to ask them to move in a 4-foot, setback, a 4-foot, move the building back. It serves no purpose. Besides that, we got letter from the adjoining properties that say it won't affect them negatively. Additionally, the back of the lot where it backs up to I-75, you're certainly not going to get, I got permission from the owner to tour the site, and that brush back there has to be, and the trees have to be at least 20, 30 feet high. There's no way people from I-75 will even see this. So because it's so isolated, it's an industrial area, it's already, the existing building already has a 6-foot setback, I'd recommend approval of this variance.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone over here? Make a comment? Mr. Eisenmacher?
I agree with Mr. Krent. I visited the property on Sunday, just rode by, had a look at it, and there's also a slight topographic difference on the west side of the building that makes that, if there was a 4-foot strip in the back, would be completely useless for any any purpose whatsoever.
Okay? And,
As a matter
our
of,
city attorney,
you should open up the matter for public hearing.
Right.
And then close it because there's
Right.
nobody here, but just
Right.
so it's a matter of record.
I did have one question, though, since, and normally we do that right before we bring it back for consideration, correct? So should I just do that now, or?
You could do it at any time.
Okay, well, I'll do it right after my
The requirement is
question.
we have a public hearing.
Right, I understand. I just have one question related to, since the trucking industry is obviously so highly regulated, is there, related to governmental oversight, is that, a variance, more space is better than less? In this regard? I know you're not probably a transportation attorney, but if you know where I'm going with this, is that something as far as a public safety concern, potentially, if they don't have the variance?
Well, public safety is something this board can consider. Whether, I'm not really you're right, I'm not a transportation expert. I assume the traffic engineer would have reviewed this, and they did indicate they spoke with the engineering department. They would probably be in a better position to respond to that question. But yes, public safety obviously is something this board has to consider whenever they determine whether they should approve or deny a variance.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, do you have anything further to comment on that issue?
Yeah, I will say in the review of this, the fire department will be involved to make sure, for example, that they have proper access to the building, certain mandatory turning radiuses, if accomplishable, will be accomplished.
Okay.
And the zoning ordinance also creates, for example, minimum aisleway widths for safe passage, say, to the rear of the property.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Well, seeing no further comments at this point in time, I will call the public hearing open for this matter. And if there are any members of the public who would like to address the board on this petitioner's request, please come forward at this time. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring the matter back to the board for consideration. Are there any further comments, or is there someone who would like to make a motion?
I'd move approval.
Mr. Courtney?
I'll second.
It seems ridiculous to make them move 4 feet to the east and then cause problems for trucking and an irregular shape to the building.
Okay, motion made. Mr. Krent seconds that the motion, and now we have any discussion on the motion. Seeing none, I believe we're prepared for a vote. Mr. Evans?
Mr. Courtney?
Yes?
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Bloomingdale?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Variance is granted.
You have your variance. Have a very good evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So moving forward on the agenda, we have communication. I'd just like to note that Mr. Krent and I believe a number of others mentioned that there was one communication in our file related to that request, and that was the adjoining property owner. I don't believe there's any further communication for the board for tonight's consideration. Is that correct, Mr. Evans?
That is correct.
Okay. And I don't believe we have any other miscellaneous business at this point?
None.
Okay. And now, item number 7 is public comment. So the public has a right now to speak on non-agenda items related to the board's business, and I will open that up now if anyone would like to come forward. Seeing none, since there are no other members in the audience, I will close that portion out. And do board members have anything that they'd like to share? Other than it's very warm outside and our 90-degree high humidity evening. So this may be a record. I've been on this board for many, many years. Of course, Mr. Courtney has been on much longer than I have, but I don't believe we've ever been done at 7:49 in the evening.
If the staff would bring in the cold beer, we could stay for another hour or two.
Well, we'll hopefully strike that from the recorded portion of this message. But I would like to close our meeting tonight and have everybody, and ask everyone to enjoy the rest of their summer. We'll see you back here in August. Have a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.